Okay, so let's get started. Welcome to our next in our webinar series. This one is leveraging the lockdown, how to look forward to your new normal. Today we're going to be discussing some really heavy topics. There are some stories coming out right now from China about how the filing rate has dramatically increased now that their COVID-19 has decreased. And that's kind of rough. It's certainly a harbinger of something that we can note for the United States. As people are trapped in their homes, they're also with their partners. And for some, that might be an excellent opportunity to spend some great quality time together and enjoy each other's company. But for others, for marriages that have been struggling underneath the surface, that time might be rough. So today with us, we have Nancy Brown, who is an LCSW. I'm going to ask her a little bit more about her background because she has an impressive resume. We have Dr. Elizabeth Deguy-Dubois, the divorce coach here at Z Family Law, and I'm here, of course, as I am each time, to talk to you about these issues. So we're going to give you some information. I see we already have one hand raised. We will absolutely answer questions at the end, so definitely keep hanging on. We'll go through them. But let's start with background. Nancy, can you tell us a little bit more about your backgrounds?
I did my undergrad work at NYU. I was actually, though, in an entirely different field. I was a film major, and I worked in the entertainment industry for about 10 years before I went back to NYU and got my master's in social work, where I immediately upon graduating studied for a year with Imago Relationship Therapy, amazing teachers. And from there, I also did some EFT, emotionally focused therapy training, and internal family systems. I've also trained with John Gottman. These are all, if you don't know who they are, sort of the premier couples therapy. And I also have a specialization in women's reproductive health.
Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. And for those who don't know, very briefly, Dr. Dubois, can you tell everyone what your background is?
Yeah, sure. So I have a PhD in conflict analysis and resolution, which is a multidisciplinary field. I say intellectually, I had two different mentors within that program. One was a cultural anthropologist and one is a psychologist. So in my practice, I bring that kind of two-prong approach. I think about the psychology of the people involved in the conflict, which for what I do is a divorce or domestic violence issue. So the psychology of the people involved in the conflict, and then the kind of cultural situation in which it's unfolding. So think a lot about the ways in which we're socialized in this culture, to think about our gender roles and stereotypes and how those play into protracting conflicts within marriages. And between my master's degree in sociology and then my PhD, I've been studying divorce, domestic violence, and the legal responses to those issues for about 12 years. And I've gotten to do that work in 4 different countries. And so I've had a cross-cultural approach throughout this practice.
Thank you. And for those of you who don't know, I'm Christy Zlakis. I'm the owner and founder of Z Family Law. I have been practicing family law for a little over 10 years now. And enough about our backgrounds, let's get right to it. So today's topic, even happily married couples and unmarried but happy couples are struggling with this social distancing and with all of us being cooped up in our houses. From what each of us have heard from our clients and our colleagues, what effect have you guys heard on your own clients about what social distancing has meant for couples? Why don't we start with you, Nancy?
I've been hearing a whole mix of things. I have heard people say, now I'm stuck in a home with people that I don't even like being with, that they're getting on each other's nerves, how stressful it is, that they're busier than ever, that they thought that there would be some downtime and instead they're busier than ever. I also think it creates some confusion just in terms of the whole social distancing, in terms of how physically close should people be even in their own home if one partner is still going out to work. If there's a marriage that's already tense, I think there's more excuse to stay separate. There's so many things, and every day it's changing.
Yeah.
to be fair, I've also heard positive things.
Oh, absolutely. We like positive.
People having family time and without all the distractions of the outside world, taking walks, reconnecting in those ways.
So by the time they come to me, they're usually not at that point, which we hope the majority are. We absolutely do. We're a big believer in happy marriages here. But for those that aren't, and that's kind of where I want to focus on today, for those who are at home and are feeling stuck, some of the things that I'm hearing from some of my clients, prospective clients, and even colleagues, is how being stuck in a lockdown type situation, being stuck in a stay-at-home order, can really bring to the forefront of people's minds problems which they were able to somewhat successfully push down. So by the everyday life of raising children, or fixing appliances or whatever else might be, they've been able to ignore or just get through it. Now it's okay, here's this big problem in the room and I have to deal with it. What about you, Dr. DeBois? What have you been hearing?
It's interesting. I've gotten this week kind of the alpha and the omega. A couple, I should say I only work with one partner or the other, but the woman of this hetero couple was saying, we're cooped up, but we're bringing our best selves to each other. And I thought, therein lies the goal, right? Like, you're in a small space and you show up and you bring your very best self. Not just we're going to tolerate each other right now, but we're going to conscientiously step into a place we are the very best version of ourselves, understanding that we're kind of under siege. And then the omega side of it, which was, I had a client cross the finish line of being able to emotionally say, I'm ready to file for divorce. So even though she's in the context of cooped up with her partner, there's an emotional kind of conveyor belt that you have to travel along. There's a number of different emotional milestones that you have to hit before you decide, my marriage has gone from a place where I really want to try to work on it to, I think I'm ready to exit. There's still a couple of stops along the way before you get to, I want to file for divorce. And so I've seen people on the spectrum of saying, we were in a tense place, but we're going to hit pause on the conflict and we're just going to show up as our best selves right now and figure it out on the other side. And people saying, this isn't how I want to spend the next, however many decades I have on the planet, and I'm going to make a wholly different choice. So I think it's across the board, but it's exciting to see people decide what they want for themselves right now, whether that's I'm going to show up and be my best self, or my best self means I'm going solo after this lockdown is over.
So Nancy, what advice can we give couples who maybe going into this period of social distancing were already starting to have some trouble, whether they were aware of it or not? There are cracks in the foundation of a family home. What advice can we give these couples during this open-ended stay-at-home period?
I love this notion of bringing your best self. And if everyone were mature enough and capable enough to do that, that would be my wish, of course. But I do think that, extreme times call for extreme measures. And if we can really encourage people to be more mindful about how they're interacting with each other. First of all, to back up for a minute, they have to take time for themselves. Right. And this may be challenging if there's young kids at home, if they have a small space, but I think it's really important. I actually recommend people meet in the morning, have some version of a family meeting if they can, to discuss what the schedule looks like that day. When can you get your time? When can I get my time? Whether that's a walk by yourself, whether that's in the bedroom with the door closed, taking a nap, screaming into a pillow, whatever it is. I think if you really want to bring your best self forward, thinking about a couple of things you can do each day that might just make the day go a little easier for each other. This is temporary. It's uncertain how temporary, but it is temporary. And if you know still at the end that you're going to then go ahead and deal with the hard stuff, then why not do your best in this tight situation to do what you can. I mean, I could go on and on with, having a routine, picking your battles, communicating directly and clearly, Using I statements. I mean, I have 100, I don't want to take up all the time, but I can go on and on with ways you can be more supportive of each other.
Please give us your top 5. I mean,
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
People need to know what to do during this time. So what are your best ones? If you had to limit it to 5 things that people could remember or write down, or that we can email them after, this webinar and say, these are the 5 things that Nancy said to do. What would—
So I'm huge on communication.
Mm-hmm.
And assuming the best of each other, even when you're not feeling great about each other, right? You are all in this together. You're trying to get through this, again, temporary time. So I would say communicate directly and clearly, number 1. Now is not the time for passive aggressive comments or, well, it would be nice if you blah, blah, blah. How about just very clearly saying, this is what I need. What do you need? Here's what I need. Can you do this? Can I just watch the criticism and the contempt, right? Yeah. Gottman talks about, just complete poison for a relationship, right? I mean, it does require, I guess, number 1 then is really being mindful how you're communicating. Here's a really simple one. It sounds silly. Say thank you. Yeah. Just say thank you more, at least 12 times a day. Validate. It's a scary and uncertain time, and frustrating, and something that we talked about, and I imagine we'll continue to talk about throughout this webinar, is how much loss everyone's experiencing right now. The loss of your daily routine, the loss of your potential, summer plans, spring break, the kids' school, your future, your finances, and throw in there potentially your relationship. I think we have to give space to honor that. So sometimes just giving each other some space to experience that and be supportive of that, recognize it.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. So I want to pivot a minute, and I'm going to start with Dr. Dubois on this one, but Nancy, I absolutely want to hear your thoughts too. Dr. Dubois, I know that you have a little boy at home. He's adorable and awesome, and we deal with a lot of parents. We have parents going through separation and divorce, those who have already been, separated and divorced for a long time and have been co-parenting, and now new co-parenting challenges are springing forth from this. How do we educate our child at home? How do we ensure that the child is spending time with both parents if they're in one location or the other? Same thing with siblings and stuff. Can you tell us a little bit about how your family's coping with that and suggestions you might have for other families?
Yeah, so I think baseline suggestion is just really write yourself a pass. When I was 8 months pregnant, I was interviewing pediatricians. The pediatrician that is still my son's pediatrician now at age 6 said, that the biggest challenge for parents in the DMV, right, this kind of District of Columbia, Maryland, Virginia, is that they overparent. And she's like, when you are concerned that you are too relaxed, take it 50% further. She's like, the anxiety level that kids have in this area is what we see in New York, right? These very kind of hyper-focused, hyperactive, high type A personality achieving parents. For our kids in general, we need to pick it down a notch, right? You are valuable and loved just because of who you are. And so when you're in a moment like we are now, I want to say, take it even further. Give yourself a lot of grace right now. If your kids are on the tablet for, way longer than they would be normally, write yourself a pass. If your laundry is piling up, write yourself a pass. Because if you're working full time, your kids are home, and then I know my son is at the District of Columbia schools, the expectation is that I'm teaching for 5 to 6 hours a day. There's something that is going to give there. And what I have decided for myself is the 2 things I will not cross the line on, my 2 personal boundaries that I will not cross is 1, I won't yell at my kid. And then 2, we have to have at least some quality time. That does not mean I'm sitting and building a Lego palace with him. It means at the end of the day, my Alexa will go off at 5:30. He knows at 5:30 he has 100% mommy, right? And I may not be 100% mentally there, but he knows like he can be on top of me. He can be in my space. One suggestion I have for parents, I bought a trampoline for $50 on Amazon, right? Like, kids have these little bodies and they're structured to move. And if they're at a decent school, they've got movement built into the day. And so one of the things I found most helpful is really structuring movement in. And so if you're a parent, you've got a kid at home and they've kind of like glommed onto you, find stuff for them to do to move. My like community online, we're part of a Beachbody community, and at 11 o'clock we have a kids gym class, and all of these families sign on, and my son can see all of these other kids all around the country, and we all do a workout video together, right? And so from 11 to 11:30, he's seeing other kids and he's moving his body, which means when I am working, he's chill and zoned out because he's gotten all of those wiggles out. And so I think that's really important.
Thank you. Nancy, what are your thoughts on that? I know a lot of parents are struggling at home and really struggling with, some of what Elizabeth expressed of the, how do I be a good mom and be a good worker? How do I be a good dad and be a good, whatever it is your job is?
So much pressure. I wrote, my very first thing I wrote down is I wrote, give yourself a break. And I didn't mean a literal break, although that's good too, but a pass. Yeah. Good enough is good enough.
Yes.
This is not the time I can't tell you how many calls of parents of teens that I've gotten right now where the teens, they can't tolerate watching them lay on the couch. I myself have a teenager who really likes to lay on the couch with his iPhone, and it's hard to look at, right? But they're also, depending on where you live, at MCPS, there was no school for them for the last couple weeks. So what are you going to do? Are you going to make yourself sick and crazy over it? Or are you going to give yourself a break, give them a break? I think it is really important though, to have a routine in your house. There's a pandemic out there and that is a huge concern, but I'm also very concerned about the mental health of this country in general. People are depressed and anxious, even in a house where there isn't marital tension. There's so many uncertainties, and people need to be moving and exercising, and trampolines, I love it. I want to get one for myself. But routine really helps with that. So I highly recommend that as well. Last thing also, parents are really stressing about, oh my God, their brains are going to turn to mush, too much screen time. I think your kids will survive a little extra screen time for the next
period,
several months, whatever it is. Yeah.
So Nancy, when it comes to small children, I know routine is great for all of us, every last one of us. But in my line of work, we do work with a lot of child psychologists and things like that. And some of the things that I have been told is the younger your kid, the more important the routine. Would you agree with that, or do you have any thoughts on that?
I do agree. I think routine is important for all of us. I think it's just underestimated. And you can see now when you've had, those of us who've had this sort of, no one knows what day it is, right? They just this unstructured time. And I watch people, they looking and feeling depressed. You feel icky after several days of it. It doesn't feel good. So I think it's important for everyone, but it is, yes, it's especially important for the young ones to keep some kind of structure and routine. It doesn't have to be by the minute. It doesn't have to be a very specific activity. You can break it up into, creative time, school time, outside time, but it's really helpful in this time of uncertainty to know, okay, I get up at this time, and at this time I get to go and have my wiggles, and then I'm going to have my snack. Right? That's why in preschool they have it.
Yeah.
Listed out.
They tell them what's coming next, right? So yes, I do.
Okay, so I want to pivot the conversation a little bit, and I want to hit a couple more main topic points as we go through this before we open up to question and answer. So the next section I want to focus on is co-parenting during this time. And I want to start with co-parenting with your partner who is at home with you, not a co-parent that you are separated from and your child lives in two separate households. So if you're co-parenting in the same household, whether you're married, not married, doesn't matter, but you're all in the same household right now. Nancy, what are your thoughts on how your co-parenting should change, not change, or what's some tips for good co-parenting when you're parenting together all day long every day, as opposed to a couple hours at night and a couple hours on the weekends? Or
some of this is super uncharted territory for people, right? There are some parents who have never haven't been at home, will leave for work at 6, 7 in the morning and don't come home till dinner time and have no idea what's happening in between there, really, right? Except maybe on the weekends. I think first and foremost, it's so important to be a unified front. So if you can avoid unilateral decisions, if you can say, I'm going to ask mommy, I'm going to ask daddy, we'll get back to you, we'll talk about this, we'll have a family meeting, whatever it is. I think it's really important because, I mean, there may be less things one has to ask mom and dad about these days. Like, you're not going out with the car these days.
Right.
Well, you could, but still, I think.
Hey, Mom, how many pieces of toilet paper can I use today?
I don't know. Let me ask your father first.
Sorry, I had to interject with that one. I can't not have a toilet paper.
But I do think that's important. And again, the same thing that you said earlier, Dr. Dubois, about giving a little bit of grace and a pass. At the same time, we do have to kind of give a pass to each other. It's not, my saying all is good enough is good enough. We're just doing our best. And we do have to just allow, there's a lot of, I go back to this thing of so much uncertainty, so much uncharted territory. So just checking in regularly and
the other thing I've noticed is, people handle anxiety very differently. And everybody, I don't care who you are, your anxiety level's up right now. To varying degrees, but anxiety is just up. It's out in the world. It's infectious as much as COVID-19 is. And people handle anxiety very differently. And one thing that I have seen in some of my clients is you'll have one person who's handling anxiety by hyperactivity. We're going to write down all the things. We're going to do all the activities. We're going to schedule everything all the time. And then their partner who is, it's going to be fine. Let the kids watch extra stuff. So what if they had, chocolate chip pancakes for breakfast and then they had made some banana bread? It's a lot of sugar, but whatever. It's a fun time. How do those two parents get on the same page to have that united front? These differences probably benefit the children at the end of the day and benefit their families and probably each other, but now we have a situation where it's not just, happening in an open air. Now it's happening in a very tight area. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Can I say something really quick?
Sure.
I think first and foremost, it's really important for the parent who appears to be less anxious than the other parent to validate first and foremost for their spouse or their partner, how anxious they feel and how concerned they are, rather than telling them to calm down or don't worry about it or, oh, come on, it's a special time, they won't feel understood. And then they may dig their heels in more. If you, and this is something I'll use in all areas for couples, if you can validate first the anxiety, the uncertainty, once again, or the losses, whatever's going on, they'll be much more open to change, to wiggle room. And I think if they can also see how these two styles complement each other really in some ways, it's good that, thank goodness they're not both so over the top or both so chill, right? That there are times where maybe extra precaution is needed, right? To remind everyone to be washing their hands and using their hand sanitizer, and don't touch the mail. And also to remind each other, like, hey, why not why not stay up an extra hour late? Who's getting up so early, right? I think you can do that better when you are acknowledging where your partner's coming from, meeting them where they are.
So let's pivot to partners who are co-parenting, and they're co-parenting partners. They're no longer partners, where they're two separate households. I'm going to start with Dr. Dubois on this one. Elizabeth, what advice do you have for parents who are co-parenting during a high-stress time? And let's face it, co-parenting, from at least our perspective, is not easy no matter what time it is.
No, yeah. So it's interesting because as much as this is a time where people are separated, there's almost a unification that happens when you're under siege in the way that our species is at the moment. And I've found that high conflict parents are either doing one of two things. They're protracting into like the worst versions of themselves, or they're rallying to the cause and doing exactly what Nancy said, which is presenting a unified front. So I can talk a little bit, because of client confidentiality, I'm going to set aside my clients. I'll use myself as an example right now. My co-parent and I had a very contentious divorce, but we have come to the table for our kid since that time. And right now we are doing exactly what Nancy said, which is a unified front. Our son, who for, anyone out there watching is almost 6, had a very difficult time the first week of lockdown, really, really challenging emotional time. And we would spend time together as a family on the sofa at night. My ex would be on FaceTime, and it was the 3 of us there chatting with our kid about why everyone was safe, how we were all washing hands, how it was going to be okay. And now in the mornings, while I'm on our staff meeting that ZFL does every morning, my ex-husband is on the iPad in my bedroom with my child, occupying our son, and that's their quality time in the morning. And that's not just for our son to connect with his dad. That's my ex-husband really doing me a solid. He knows it's important that I'm on this team meeting and that I am my best self on that call. And he stepped up to the plate and said, that's going to be the time where I make sure that Liam is occupied. And so I acknowledge that to offer that there's templates for co-parents. I am not having a tremendous amount of interaction with my co-parent, but my son is right now. And the way that that's happening is because we've been gracious enough to each other to say, hey, I have this meeting every morning at 9. Can you fill in the gap here? Or, vice versa. And then the other thing I think that I want to just put out there for parents of any, I don't care where you are on kind of the contentious scale with your co-parent, do your child a solid and let it go right now. Any sort of conflict that you've had where you have any sort of tension when your child expresses an interest in their other house and you kind of shut down emotionally, give it a rest. Your kid is going through a lot right now. And as much as you may be having emotions about losing your time with your colleagues, which I know I'm feeling a lot of grief about, your kid has had their world turned upside down. To go from being in school full time and friends and all of that to being locked in a house, that is such a difficult thing. Kids' brains work in absolutes. They are not seeing the nuance of this. They're all very scared. So if you are home with a kid, you're locked down, let's say your normal access schedule has been interrupted, and they want to talk to daddy all the time, that is not them saying, screw you, you're a bad parent, mom. That's saying, I need reassurance right now, and I'm going to pivot and make sure both of my parents are okay. So if you are in a super contentious place, and in general, you kind of squick up when your kid mentions the other house, or maybe they want a picture of dad by their bedside table and it just makes you feel sick to your stomach, give it a rest. This is the moment to chill out, and hopefully you can carry that forward beyond the lockdown.
Nancy, what are your thoughts about co-parents and advice for co-parents who are not living in the same home for how you can present that united front to your children?
It's so interesting. I'm thinking about the couples that I work with, or even some teenagers that I work with, and maybe because it feels like we've been doing this forever, right? But we're only in the second actual week of lockdown, right? I haven't had a lot. I'm anticipating in the weeks to come really getting a deluge. I think people are still adjusting.
Yeah.
So I can't speak from what's coming to me as much as what I hope is happening, and which is absolutely what you're saying, Elizabeth, is to put that aside for your kids. You and us, we all know that that's not always possible. We often will ask parents, can you please put this aside for the sake of your children? They're not always capable of it. So again, if you're having difficulty with your co-parent, doing the best you can to pull in maybe other family members, even virtually, to add support for your kid. What you don't want to do is make the conflict worse.
Yeah.
Right. So if you need to just sort of disconnect in some way, or don't look to make any major changes. Don't. My favorite saying is, don't go to the hardware store for a bagel. If your ex wasn't capable of it before, they're not going to be capable of it now. Just know the limitations and work with it.
Thank you both so much. So I'm going to now pivot away from parenthood. We're going to take parenthood and put it on the shelf, and we're going to talk about couples in relationships, whether they're married or not married. I want to focus on relationships and we're using the term lockdown, but really stay in place orders, quarantines, whatever applies specifically to you. So social distancing, any of that. Again, we're hoping that a lot of couples who are really happy out there and marriages that are really happy and enjoying all this together time and enjoying every moment. But this webinar is for those who are not and who are at home struggling, going, I'm stuck. We started with some things that they can do. Nancy, you gave us some 5 great tips, but I want to pivot to those who are having relationship problems that may or may not already be in therapy. But is this the time to work on those problems? I'm torn on this one.
Say again?
I'm kind of torn on this one. Is this the time? Is this an opportunity, or is this a bad idea because we're in a pressure cooker?
And I feel like it's a case-by-case basis. I want to say my first instinct is to say no. No big changes right now, right? So that also means no super big challenging conversations when neither one of you can really, I mean, you can go out and take a walk, but where else are you going to go?
Right.
If it can wait, it's probably best. I also think why I say case by case is if you're a couple who does have conflict, but you know how to work together. Let's say you've been working with a therapist. I still recommend, if you're going to try and work on some issues that are still coming up interpersonally, that you try and do that with your therapist, because there's a process there. I don't recommend doing it on your own. I recommend then for sure just putting it aside. There's enough going on out there that to feel also some sort of pressure. I think that there's a pressure, maybe like we have this time, we should be working on things, but it doesn't work that way. Working on a relationship takes time. It's slow. It's not done under, crisis circumstances necessarily.
So if I'm that person who I'm in a relationship, it's not, there's been tension for a while. But I've been focused on the kids, focused on my job, focused on everything else. And here I am stuck in a room 24 hours a day with this person. And now there it is in my face. I can't ignore it. I can't look around it. I have to deal with it. And I'm coming to that realization of I have to deal with this, at least for the foreseeable future, but I have to deal with this. What advice do you have for me for getting through this time?
Hello.
Lucky my aqua dragon.
I really do. Christy, you said something earlier this morning that I thought was, do you want to talk about what you said?
Sure. I mean, I was curious your thoughts, but I can tell you, I'm hearing this.
Well, I'll tell you my thoughts, but I loved what you said, so I'm not going to steer away for you. So first and foremost, recognize that many couples are on autopilot on our regular, when life is not under, right? We get up, we get the kids to school, we go to work, we come back, we do laundry, dinner, whatever it is, and then we go to bed, and maybe we haven't shared an actual real bit of conversation with our partner all day long. And then we busy ourselves on the weekends with this, that, or the other thing, maybe go out with other people, and you're not really interacting, and you can avoid what you know is sort of on some level bubbling under the surface. And so being stuck at home definitely evokes those issues. And if you are realizing, wow, this isn't working and probably hasn't been working for a long time, and I've been able to avoid that, maybe you're realizing either that you have a lot of work ahead of you, or that you don't want to be in a relationship anymore. What I can say is, now's not the time necessarily to have that conversation, but it is a time for you to sort of go within and think about how you want to go about that. What it could look like. You can certainly reach out. There's tons of people doing teletherapy. You can reach out to an individual therapist. Please reach out to your friends for support. Keep a journal, write stuff down. It's yet another loss that I think people have probably been avoiding. And so here you are dealing with all the losses again of what we're dealing with on an everyday basis in this difficult time, but then the loss of potentially of your relationship and your family as you know it, that's huge.
Yeah.
So you just have to, I mean, I would say give yourself the time to really process that.
Yeah, and I want to put in a plug for discernment therapy, discernment coaching, discernment counseling, specifically if you're in your home and you're kind of figuring out if this is done and I don't want to do any more work, but I don't know what the path forward looks like for discernment coaching, and discernment therapy, which perhaps Nancy, you can speak to a bit more in detail. I think that's a very particular type of therapy. For those of you watching, there's any number of different approaches, right? And Nancy talked about 3 different ones that she's done, right? Imago, family systems, you've trained under John Gottman. So there's any number of different therapeutic tools at your availability at the ready. So if you are reaching out, you're at this point where you're kind of like done and you know you need some support. What I want to put in a plug, if you're at that point and you are looking for teletherapy, specifically be considering some avenues that are going to be much more forward focused as opposed to kind of how do I fix my marriage. And so moving yourself to a place where you have a really well-trained therapist who understands this particular point in the life cycle of ending a marriage, I think can be the difference between getting yourself out of a like interpersonal depression space and into a forward focused, leveraging the lockdown to create your new normal space.
So thank you for that, Elizabeth. So what I think Nancy was referring to is something I said earlier in our prep call. We've certainly had some calls from people who are like, hey, I'm ready. What can we do? And we'll give you a list. If you're in that place and you're ready and you know it's that time, we're ready for you. We're ready to rock and roll. We'll give you that list of stuff you can work on while you're there. But if you're not at that place where you're ready to follow a checklist, if you've just kind of realized in your heart, you know what, I wanna be locked down with anybody but this person, and that's not right. And I'm not sure if I want to go forward, or I'm sure I want to go forward. Here's my advice to you right now. Start imagining your life 5 years from now. What do you want it to look like? You can journal it. You can create your mental vision board. But what does your life look like? What job are you in? Where are you living? If you have children, how do you share access with them, or are you living with them with your partner? What is it that you want? What job do you want? What is it that you want to wear? What adult extracurricular activities do you want to participate in? Engage in a little bit of daydreaming right now. It is kind of the perfect time for daydreaming. We have all this extra time on our hands. And when you daydream the life that you want, the next part is taking steps to get there. And this is something that we tell our clients all the time when they come in. I ask them to wave a magic wand and tell me what they want their life to look like. We, as a law firm, do what we can to help them get to that life within the bounds of what we do as lawyers. But I imagine therapists do the same type of thing. What do you want your life to look like? Okay, let's work on the steps. And I know with Elizabeth in our practice as a divorce coach, it's the same thing. What do you want your life to look like? Let's break that down and let's get to those action steps. So if you're not at the point where you're ready to take those steps, where you're ready to change your life, we're just surviving right now day to day, and that's okay. That's a good place to be. But while you're in the shower, while you're taking a hot bath, after your kids are in bed, if you're sitting there, reading a book, daydream a little bit. And that's for me how this topic came about. Leveraging the lockdown to springboard into your new normal, whether that's a new normal where your relationship has taken time to refresh, or whether it's a new normal because you have taken time to refresh, or both. But use this lockdown, use this experience, and hit the reset button. And the only way you're going to know what to reset to is by engaging in the of daydreaming. Is that what you were referring to, Nancy?
Yes, it was. Thank you.
Okay. So I want to create a practical checklist, and we are going to email this out to anybody listening afterwards. Nancy, you started one, and it was beautiful and perfect, but now I want to add the parenting piece back in just a little bit. Self-care checklist for while we're in this period. while we're, thinking about how we're going to leverage it. So my self-care checklist, things that I want people to know are: do that daydreaming. That's on mine. Daydream your life 5 years from now. Wave that magic wand in your head. What does it look like? And really focus on that. And that may have something to do with your relationship, and it may not. It probably does, if you're listening to this webinar. But take this time and figure out if you need a course correction. The other piece of advice as a family law attorney, and we did a whole webinar on this, so I'm not going to beat the point to death, but be safe. If your marital conflict is such that there is physical, emotional, or financial safety at risk, I would strongly urge this is not the time to have these conversations. If your relationship doesn't include those things, awesome. Nancy might have a different view, but from a family law perspective, I gotta be very careful. If you're experiencing emotional, financial, or most importantly in this particular circumstance, physical safety issues, now's not the time. Do what you gotta do to get through till tomorrow, and then we figure out that kind of plan. And then lastly, of course, what I want people to know is reach out. Lawyers are here to help. Therapists are here to help. Divorce coaches are here to help. We are all available online. We're not the only law firm, that can do virtual consultations or virtual appointments if you have a specific co-parenting question, or you're not sure how your parenting plan or your custody order, matches what you're doing now. Or you reach that point of, I need a checklist of what I can work on because I'm the anxiety type that needs to be doing something to get to that new normal. Reach out. We're here. Others are here. Nancy's here on Zoom, telemedicine, and know that you're not alone. You're alone, but you're not alone in the world. Nancy, what do you have to add to that?
I will go back to what I keep saying in every category. Please, if you can, take time for yourself. We don't think about how either that commute to work or even just being at work, even though we're so busy at work, having that space away, there's so much togetherness. Most of us have not spent so much togetherness, even on vacation, so much, right? So, and that can be good. But still, please take time for yourself, whatever that can look like, whether it is taking a hot bath or getting out for walks or a drive, or there's a concept called turtle time that I had talked about some time ago, which is basically an adult timeout, which is retreating into your shell and for some calm and relaxation. It's often used for adults with their kids, like mommy needs some turtle time right now. But it's the same concept. You really need some time to go within and get some space, get some perspective, and come back maybe a little less charged or emotional or frustrated, anxious, whatever you're feeling. It's not that necessarily I don't want you to avoid feeling it, but it's not always the time to sort of step into that right now. You just need to get through it.
And Elizabeth, do you have anything to add to that checklist?
Yeah, I would say within, we talked a lot about structure and structure being important. On your checklist, creating a basic structure for your day. And this doesn't have to have a time on it, right? At 8, I do this, at noon, I do this, but really a flow to your day. That has made certainly my mental health game stay, I think, on point. It's helped my son a lot. We have a basic structure to our day. And within that, for folks, right, you're trying to get through, you're hunkering down. I want to put a big plug for starting your day with some exercise. And that can be like a really beginner YouTube yoga video, right? For 10 minutes, just a little bit of movement in the morning, and a little bit of quiet time at night. So YouTube has some great meditations on it, but really bookending your day with self-care. And I'm not talking about we go do a face mask, although like Yahtzee, if you do, but really giving your mind and your body some bookends to the day. And then the final thing with Christy, she keeps talking about envision your new life. Girls, Pinterest saved my life when I was going through my marriage. And I'm chuckling looking at the wall behind me, and there's a hammock swing off to the side. I had this great Pinterest board going for the whole year that I was going through the legal process. And there were a lot of images of this color and a bunch of indoor hammocks in it. And I'm just chuckling to myself now, realizing I'm living in the Pinterest board that I created. So giving your brain those tangible ways to pep itself up in the morning, right? A little bit of movement, lock itself down a little bit at night, and then envision your new reality. Surf that Pinterest. It's fun, and it's a way to give your brain, real visual cues. And then the final thing would be find your people. Facebook has great meetups that are happening. There's tons of virtual Zoom happy hours that are happening. I have a little group of girlfriends that are getting together every night at 8:00, and that has helped structure my day. I know my son's got to be in bed by 7:45 so I can have a cup of tea and be with my friends at 8:00. And that has given me, even though I'm, in theory locked alone in a house with a 5-year-old, I feel like my day is really nice and full and structured with lots of other people.
Thank you guys for all of that. I have one more question for Nancy. And after that, we're going to take questions from others. And this one's a hard one, and I certainly don't think that I'm qualified to answer it for sure. But I do have a lot of clients where their spouse is suffering either from mental illness or a personality disorder. And I know that this can be very individual, and the advice can be very individual to the specific couple.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, with COVID-19, there is a interruption, perhaps, in people's therapy. There can be interruptions in their medication. There certainly is an interruption to routine, and the effect on those who are suffering already from a mental illness or a personality disorder, not positive, shall we say. So if you are the spouse or the partner or co-parent with somebody who suffers from a mental illness or a personality disorder, what can you as that partner do to A, support your partner or co-parent, and B, what can you do to support yourself right now?
It's a great question. To support your partner, obviously first and foremost is to try to have some compassion and dig deep for patients. It's not their fault that they have a mental illness. Reach out to their providers if they'll have it. Reach out for support yourself. Again, make sure that each of you are getting some much needed space and downtime or whatever your partner may need. You can't fix them, but you can certainly be supportive of what they're going through. And it's a lot to ask. It's a lot to ask in regular times. Again, this is so unprecedented, and I'm very aware of the fact that we're talking about something that has only been in existence. I mean, it's been in our consciousness since maybe December, January, but in our backyards for a couple of weeks. So it's uncharted, unprecedented territory. And I imagine that I'll have even more feedback and advice in 2 months from now than even today. But what I can say for sure is that number one, first and foremost, is reach out. I've had people already reaching out to me, spouses of reaching out to me on behalf of their spouse. And honestly, the funny thing about teletherapy is I'm way more available than I used to be, because if I'm doing it from home and someone can't get on with me until their kids are in bed, I'm available at 9:00 at night.
I do the same thing. I don't have to go to my office to get it. So.
Right. So and I think I can't speak for every mental health professional, but I certainly on a lot of support groups and forums myself, and we are here for you. However, text me, call me, Zoom me, whatever will help as best as we can.
Thank you. Okay, I see we have one person who has raised their hand, so I'm gonna, Sam, if you would like to unmute yourself, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Hi there, everybody.
Hi.
Hello.
My name's Sam, and I am here with my 2 wonderful sons, my wife, and my older son's girlfriend.
Hi,
They're
everyone.
in a house in Rockville. Yeah, I definitely concur with the whole thing about how, like, when you're in a stressed relationship, as I am, to kind of hit pause on those things. For the sake of like survival, we're all in this together, kind of thing. And I also think that, at least for now anyway, I'd like to confirm that yes, it's like, it just does not feel like a good time to talk about the relationship, the marriage relationship and what's going on with that. But it might be a good time to, like you said, reflect and think a little bit about what direction you want to take things once things do return to normal. And personal development, professional development are things that I definitely would like to focus on, because they're going to help shape my life when this is when this crisis passes. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you for that. We agree with every single thing that you're saying. I think I speak for all the panelists when I say it is the time to look at personal development and professional development. And as far as the relationship challenges, we certainly wish you luck. And we hope things go whatever way is going to bring you and your entire family. But I will let Nancy talk, because she's more the expert on this one. But the advice that I have been giving to my clients is, now's not the time to talk about it. Now's the time to, think in your own head about what you want. And then when this crisis has passed, it's time to have some.
Yep, I think I'm completely in agreement with that. That's what works for me, I think.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Sam, is your partner on board with that? Did you both agree together that it's time?
Oh no. I mean, our with us, it's very much like, she doesn't want to talk about it, doesn't want to do anything about it, doesn't want marriage counseling, doesn't want nothing, doesn't want any discussion about it at all. And that's the issue itself. There's no communication.
Okay. So that's working for her right now, basically.
Right. I mean, there is no way to agree to hit pause, because there's no communication at all, like none, babkas. I mean, there is about everything else, but about the two of us,
right?
Not.
And
this has been going on 3 years already.
Right. So if this were just a regular day, of course, I would be urging you to get into someone's office and let's get this conversation going. But right now, it's probably for the better.
I think it's pretty clear that any kind of like couples counseling, marriage counseling is just not going to happen. I've proposed it multiple times and been rejected multiple times, and I think I'm done suggesting that, because it's interesting, because she cites her reason for not going to marriage counseling is, she says, it leads to divorce, which is really interesting. Because I know that that's a common myth, but it's one that a lot of people believe.
Is it? Sorry, so then am I making an assumption that she doesn't want to get a divorce?
Well, that's the thing. Like, it seems like she doesn't. But the thing is that I think that she wants to continue the relationship, but under what I would consider to be intolerable conditions.
Mm-hmm. So I think, Sam, if I may, this may be the time for you to get to really go deep on what it is that works for you. And
right.
The way to be a good partner is to think about what works for both of you, right? But if you're in a situation where you've got kind of a default stalemate, this is a moment where you can do the work and the heavy lifting of journaling, thinking about what it is that you want, and what's going to be right for all of you going forward, right? You can't make decisions on behalf of your wife, but you are, like you said, the dad to two sons, and kind of thinking about your happiness and your wholeness as a person, showing up as your best self. What does that mean for the people in your life? And if that means that you make some different choices on the other side of this lockdown, taking this time to really be reflective is an opportunity. And then I don't know, Nancy, if you'd co-sign this, but there are a couple of workbooks that you can work through if you're the partner still looking to do the work. I want to hold up the marriage fitness program, where there is a Lone Ranger program where you can be working at solo, and that can give you some tools for thinking about the conflicts going on between you and your wife. I offer that up just as a tool that you can be working now autonomously from a therapist and without the buy-in of your partner. But I offer that to you only as a tool, not a suggestion.
No, well, actually, that seems like a good suggestion to me. It's interesting, I'm kind of the two of us, I'm the one who is the one who would listen to Dr. Ruth when she was on the radio. Of the two of us, I'm the one who would read the Gottmans and pour over that and read Michelle Werner Davis's The Sex Starved Marriage and read that and say hey honey, you want to read this? And the look on her face is just priceless. I mean, if it were not something to do with our life and our marriage, if it were somebody else, it would be the funniest thing in the world. The look on her face is just like are you kidding me? I mean, it's just it is the blankest, most disinterested expression I've ever seen on anyone's face.
I'm sorry, Sam.
Yeah, what are you gonna do? I mean, there's just been no opportunity to have a restorative conversation or any kind of engagement on anything, but there just seems to be this silent agreement to just kind of, I don't know, just kind of go forward. Certainly in light of the coronavirus and the sequestration that is all being under the same roof, I think that there's definitely a sort of a silent agreement to a stalemate, to a pressing pause, and I think I'm okay with that. But it just comes at a really interesting moment because we've been sort of 3 years into an involuntarily intimately free relationship, involuntary on my side.
So what I'd like to say about this in a more general sense is I've had couples into my office in a place like this where the only way they were able to get into the office is one of the partners said, I can't do this anymore. We need to separate. And then all of a sudden the person comes to the table and says, well, can we go to counseling? And sometimes It's the only way that people get in. And, if there's still something to be salvaged, sometimes it can be salvaged, but sometimes it's the only way. I don't know that will work for you. And I'm not saying that that's the route that you should take, but in the past, I have certainly had couples that only got into this door because of that.
Yep. And I think that speaks to walkaway power. And I feel like I don't quite yet have my walkaway power yet.
Yep.
Well, Sam, thank you so much for listening. If you need any further resources, definitely please check out our website, www.zfamilylaw. And Nancy has an excellent website. Do you want to say the URL?
Yes, greaterwashingtontherapy.com. And sorry, I didn't say in the beginning that I am co-founder of Integrative Therapy of Greater Washington in Rockville.
Great.
We have about 5 therapists on staff that cover from early childhood all the way to the elderly. So we cover it all.
Fantastic.
Sam, I don't want to cut you off, but I do have one more hand raised, and we do want to.
Of course. Oh, absolutely.
So thank you so much. And if we can be of service to you in any way, please don't hesitate to reach out to either Z Family Law
Thank you.
or to Nancy Brown. Thank you.
Good luck, Sam.
Okay. Can you please tell us your question?
Hi. Yeah. So I'm dealing with a situation where my partner is the one who is very anxious about the whole situation, and being constantly around that anxiety is causing me the anxiety. It's not, my anxiety isn't necessarily generated from the situation, but from being around someone who is super anxious. How can we work together on this?
Sorry, and just for those of you who don't recognize her voice, this is Megan Parlett. She's our Director of Operations. She's asking somebody else's question who was afraid to call in. So she volunteered to help us out by saying the question out loud. So thank you for that, Megan. We really appreciate it.
Sure.
I just didn't want to give anybody the impression it was your specific question.
I was about to call you and say, is Chris okay? So I'm glad.
So thank you for asking that question.
Sure.
But go ahead, let's answer that question. So for anxiety, for those who are lathering each other up, those couples, because they're both anxious and increasing anxiety, what can we do? Nancy, do you have thoughts on that?
So a few things. Can you devote a certain time of the day, can you set a timer for 30 minutes or something and allow your partner to speak all of the anxieties they have and all of the anxieties that you may have about this, and sort of then call a moratorium. I mean, listen, you're going to feel it, but in terms of the talking about it, but part of that process is what I was saying earlier, which is there a level of validation in there? Is there, this makes sense to me that you're anxious because there's so much unknown, there's so much uncertainty. You're worried about our finances, you're whatever it is, and a real acknowledgement and a not just a validation, but the empathy, you know, and perhaps even for your partner to be able to validate back that their anxiety is really whipping you up, right? And then, but then there does have to be some sort of agreement of sort of a moratorium on the constant conversation. And by the way, please, people, stop watching the news 24/7 if you are. Limit social media, the articles. I mean, we want to be informed. We don't want to be completely ignorant, but it's a lot. And I don't know, I'm making assumptions. I don't know if this couple is doing that, but it only leads to more and more and more anxiety. And then of course, you know, other ways to combat that anxiety is make sure that you're getting some form of exercise, and make sure that, you know, and are you on medication? And if you're not, it's a hard time to start, because I'm not even sure what the ruling is on prescribing through telehealth. It's been unclear to me, but you know, there are certainly over-the-counter sort of remedies, you know, and yoga and meditation, and also you can even do that together. There's great apps, Calm, Headspace, things like that.
Yeah, and Christy, if I can kick in another thing, is that all right?
Sure. And then we're going to end it because of time.
Yep. I also want to just offer the resource if you need some human interaction around this. I do want to kick in CODA meetings right now. I think those are giving a lot of people comfort, which is just Codependence Anonymous, which is not to say you are codependent. It's to say there are pockets of support out there on the internet for folks who are feeling very activated or triggered by their partners. So there's lots of spaces where you can find community among other people that are dealing with this kind of like you're amping each other up. So don't be afraid to ask for help, because help is there, even though we're all separated from each other.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Nancy. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. When we email you guys as a follow-up, we'll make sure we include links to both, how to find both organizations. And again, if we could be of service, we're happy to do so. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.